This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines for Monday, October 19th. Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia, Canada are confronting violence by commercial fishermen there and say it's nothing short of terrorism. On Saturday, a lobster pound used by the Mi'kmaq was set on fire, causing life-threatening injuries to one person, according to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The Indigenous people began asserting their treaty rights by launching a fishery in mid-September.
Like this summer, I had my nephews on my boat and they were like, "Thank you, Auntie, thank you for taking me on your boat." And I was like, "No, I'm taking you out. You're going out. This is your treaty right. You have the right to be on this water. The non-natives, that's a privilege to be out on that water, but it's my right to be out on that water."
The Mi'kmaq say racist attacks by commercial fishermen have been going on for decades. Since asserting their treaty rights last month, the Mi'kmaq have experienced an increased number of assaults, threats, and vandalism. Global News reports roughly 1,000 people gathered in Halifax, Nova Scotia yesterday to voice their support for Indigenous fishing rights. Last week, non-natives attacked the local chief, Michael Sack, at a press conference. Charges were filed against the perpetrators. Native Americans are pointing out issues they face when it comes to voting. They include having to travel long distances to vote and overcoming language barriers just to do their civic duty. Still, the nonpartisan group For Directions says it's seen an unusual swell in voter participation on reservations from North Dakota to New Mexico. In the past 2 weeks, the executive director, O.J. Siemens, says his group has registered 10,000 tribal citizens.
In Indian country, they were saying that our numbers are so low, 25, 35%. But I can guarantee you, if the middle-class white people had to go through the same barriers that natives do throughout the United States and Indian country, the turnout for those voters would plummet also.
Another issue is the lack of a physical home address on tribal ID cards. In North Dakota, 19,000 people who live on the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation don't have street addresses. Their reservation is 72 square miles. Still, Gavin Clarkson, a Choctaw who ran for a U.S. Senate seat in New Mexico, says tribal IDs must be seen as a valid form of ID to vote.
Not necessarily everybody has a good valid birth certificate. Because there's some of these cross-border tribes, like the Kickapoos in Eagle Pass, Texas, some of the tribal members, even though they're considered U.S. citizens because they're tribal members, they were actually born in Mexico. Because the tribe, and you've got some tribes that cross across the Canadian border as well. So tribal IDs always need to be viewed as valid IDs.
In our coverage of Native Vote 20, Indian Country Today is following the races of 14 Native American candidates running for Congress from both parties. Most are hoping to sit in Congress for the first time, but a few are incumbents running for re-election, like Republican Markwayne Mullen, who is Cherokee. He was first elected to office in 2013. He is running for re-election to the U.S. House to represent Oklahoma's 2nd Congressional District, which is a Republican district. Oklahoma is a red state, voting for Trump in 2016 and for Romney in 2012. Markwayne Mullen supports legislation that would give tribal epidemiology centers the same status as state centers. He faces Democrat and fellow Cherokee citizen Danielle Lanier for the congressional seat. The National Congress of American Indians is calling for an investigation after South Dakota hospitals refused to care for 2 Native patients diagnosed with COVID-19. The Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe's health department says it was turned away by 14 facilities before finding one in Minnesota that would accept the patients. The Associated Press reported the 2 were sent out of state for advanced care, even as South Dakota's top health officials insisted the state had plenty of hospital capacity for COVID-19 patients. A reward is being offered after a tribal sign is defaced with the message 2020 Trump along with the Nazi swastika. It happened on the Red Lake Reservation in Punima, Minnesota. Its boundary sign was defaced. The tribe issued a statement condemning the actions, saying, quote, "The nature of this racist message is very concerning to the Red Lake Band in light of the fact that white supremacists have recently been emboldened throughout the United States to carry out extreme actions. The Red Lake Band believes it is important to nip this behavior in the bud." The tribe is offering a $5,000 reward to find the person who defaced the sign. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today for Monday, October 19th. I'm Patty Tholahungva. When we come back, the Elders and Youth Conference held each year in Alaska is the largest gathering of its kind for Native people. We'll hear how this year's virtual event turned out. Each year, just before the annual conference of the Alaska Federation of Natives, there is a conference called Elders and Youth, and it's organized by the First Alaskans Institute. And like all groups, they held the 2020 conference all online. And while at first registration was slow, it certainly picked up. Karla Booth is the Indigenous Leadership Consortium Director, and she oversees the 37th Annual Elders and Youth Conference. Welcome, Karla.
Hello, good morning. I'm Agun Schlack.
Well, probably this time last week you were knee-deep in the virtual world. Did being virtual create a different kind of conference for elders and youth?
Oh, definitely. Even though it was virtual, it still maintained the same spirit that we would have had if we were meeting in person. It required just a lot of, before conference logistics, balancing all these phone calls to set up speakers, emails to confirm speakers, and then of course registration to make sure that we had attendees for our audience. So it was a lot of logistics, but it was all worth it, all worth it.
And you shared with me a little bit about how registration was slow at first, and then it picked up. And in order to make this happen, you actually had to mail out a lot of registration bags.
Yeah, so a very popular segment of our conference is our Living and Loving Our Cultures workshops. So these are our hands-on workshops that allow participants to learn, traditional knowledge and skills. And this year we had a total of, I think, about 14 workshops that were offered in this category. And of those, 7 of them required kits to be mailed out. So we actually made about 400 kits. And for those that received a kit, they were able to participate in cottonwood carving, cedar basket weaving, cedar bracelet weaving. They could sew a canvas rifle case. And then there was also COVID-19 mask sewing, hand-sewn mask. So a lot to choose from. And, again, it was very popular with our participants.
That must have been a lot of work to get all of that out and make sure they received it in time for the actual workshop. How did the elders respond to this virtual workshop or virtual conference?
Oh, you know what? We couldn't be happier. Our elders were involved from the very beginning to the very end. On Sunday of our conference, we had a warming of the hands gathering, and this is the segment that really sets the tone for how we're going to be for the rest of the week. And it was such a beautiful gathering because on our call we had a couple traditional healers that were really able to set the stage and remind us on how we can be open to the knowledge that's going to be shared, and also how to take care of ourselves as we engage in the virtual conference. Then we heard from 2 elders that were in their 90s. And we had one elder that was from Southeast Alaska, another elder that was from the interior. And then we rounded out our Sunday gathering with a storyteller that was from Southwest Alaska. So our elders really helped set the stage for our gathering at the very beginning. And they maintained a presence throughout the event, either by video conferencing in or even calling in. Our elder keynote was Trimble Gilbert, and while we were waiting to speak with him, his generator went out. So we had to remain patient and keep a level head while we try to get connection back with him. And it all worked out in the end, and it was just beautiful, and it really just, it gave us what we needed during this time of COVID, to hear from our elders and to get guidance from them.
Well, that's a great story. And again, you know, this is the only gathering of its kind where Indigenous people are bringing elders and youth together. Give us some background. How did this start? How did this Elders and Youth Conference actually begin ahead of the Alaska Federation of Natives annual conference?
Well, this is our 37th year for the Elders and Youth Conference, so it does have a long history. And I believe that it started with, I think, a gathering of the elders. It was the elders only. And then there was a gathering for the youth only. And then at some point, while the Alaska Federation of Natives was hosting these events, they decided to combine them. So then you started that annual conference of bringing our elders and our youth together. And then I believe it was in 2004 is when AFN asked that First Alaskans Institute go ahead and take over coordination of the conference. So we've been doing it for, I think it's been about 16 years now.
It's a really good example of being able to bring those elder voices and that knowledge and wisdom to this younger generation for youth. And the theme this year was we are making a good path. And it was actually written out in 2 different Alaska Native languages.
Mm-hmm. Yes, just a few years ago, First Alaskans Institute, we made a commitment to include our Alaska Native languages in our theme. And so this year we randomly drew the Sukshtun and Alutiiq languages. So in Sukshtun, you say our theme, Asiskamek Apuchiluta, and in Alutiiq, it's Asiskanak Aputliluta. Of course, I'm not a fluent speaker, so forgive me if I make mistakes there, but it was just a really special process to speak with community language warriors or language healers to put our heads together to come up with this theme. And I'm just grateful to say that we consulted the Indigenous language first and then decided on the theme. Rather than going from English to Sukshtun or English to Alutiiq, we went from Sukshtun and Alutiiq to English. And that was a lesson learned over the last few years.
And that makes more sense because quite often in our Indigenous languages, you can't have a verbatim, translation from English into our languages because the thought process is different. So that makes sense to go from the Indigenous languages into English and then come up with something that all groups can get behind. In all of these years, as the youth graduate out of Elders and Youth Conference and they go into AFN, what kind of leadership or people who have come through this path, what kind of success stories can you share with us?
Well, I've got to say that just because they grow and become an adult doesn't mean that they have to leave Elders and Youth Conference. While we target elders and youth, everybody in between is also welcome. But we ask the adults that participate to really uphold our elders and our youth and really help facilitate, that transference of knowledge between these two valuable generations. And, as far as our youth going on, oh gosh, I feel like there's lots of success stories. We have so many moving parts when it comes to hosting the conference. We have conference guides that are typically young leaders that, help us move through the schedule and keep the conversation going between presenters. I know that we've got plenty of success stories about those individuals, moving on to complete their degrees, running for office, serving our country through the military, just a variety of success stories. Everybody has their own story. So, you know, we're grateful for the time that they spend with us, the time that they donate. It's just, I think everybody feels a connection to the Elders and Youth Conference, whether you have never attended before. People still feel like there's a connection there. And whenever they're able to make time and fit, you know, elders and youth into their schedule, we'll be there for them, because we just know the importance of this gathering. And there's just so many beautiful memories that people share with us throughout the conference and then after the conference.
And all of these sessions are on Facebook, right? You have them, you put them on your Facebook page?
Yes, we did. We did live webcast some of them. And so I know through that we reached over 31,000 people, and that number is just climbing some more. So we'll probably put more footage on our social media as well as on our websites.
What was the session, Natives Got Talent? What was that all about?
Oh, that was the opportunity for our community members to send in videos of them and their unique talents. This year, we got to see footage of our youth skateboarding, doing gymnastics. We saw one performance of brothers singing Johnny Cash songs in Yupik language.
I have to look that one up. That sounds fabulous. So, and people can go to your Facebook page, and that is simply, what is it?
First Alaskans Institute. Yeah, just look up the name of our organization on Facebook, or you can find us on the web at firstalaskans.org.
All right. And then finally, you also had a voter initiative in this conference.
Yes, we are nonpartisan, but we definitely want to encourage our community to get out the Native vote. So throughout our conference, we saw videos of our leaders encouraging us to use our right to vote, as well as we had a panel discussion talking about the benefits of voting. And then also, of course, taking part in the census. So yeah, we needed to make sure throughout our conference that these messages were delivered. You know, we know that if our youth are able to encourage the adults in their lives to vote, I think those adults are more likely to follow through. So never underestimate the power of our youth.
Absolutely. Well, Karla Booth from the First Alaskans Institute, thank you so much for joining us and telling us all about the Elders and Youth Conference there.
Direction so much for listening to our story.
And we'll be sure to look up the videos on Facebook as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And when we come back, the challenges of covering the Trump campaign.
This is Indian Country Today.
Mary Annette Pember is our national correspondent based in Cincinnati, and she's been following several candidates, but there's one that's proving to be controversial. Welcome, Mary Annette.
Hi, Patty.
So give us the latest on the campaign trail. Which candidate are you following that is really being hard to pin down?
Well, yes, Donald Trump. I wrote about his recent foray into Indian country. They created something that they called the Native American Coalition, which is, I guess, not to be confused with like his group of like, committee members on his as part of his cabinet. But actually, it's just going into Indian country and trying to get more votes and more support. And his son, Donald Trump Jr., recently had a rally in Williams, Arizona. And I wrote about that, and of course the claims that were made. And what was really especially controversial to me was the reaction that we got from readers. They were just opposed, I guess, to any coverage of Donald Trump. But of course, he is running for president, so I feel that we do have some obligation to write about the man. But I was really surprised at the visceral negative reaction we got to that article.
And as you point out, we are covering the election, and so it's covering all candidates, from both parties. But what was the controversy when it comes to President Trump? He did start this Native American coalition, but over the weekend in Michigan, he didn't seem like he was really reaching out for that Native American vote, and yet there are a number of tribes in Michigan. Tell us what he said this weekend, and how the crowd responded.
Well, apparently he is opposed to changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. In particular, he made mention of that he's that he doesn't want to change it and wants to keep quote unquote celebrating Christopher Columbus's accomplishments. And he said, I'm opposed to changing it to Indigenous Peoples Day, and people just booed from the crowd in support, that they didn't want to change it. So that was kind of interesting. So it's sort of I think to say it as carefully as I can, I think he's sending really mixed messages to Native Americans.
And unlike Joe Biden, who named, and even Joe Biden, as a matter of fact, just recently over the summertime, actually named a Native American person to guide his campaign to reach out for the Native vote. Trump has not done that yet.
We haven't seen that. Mark Wayne Mullen was the person, representative, who actually was in Williams, and he kind of introduced the rally. But no, and we haven't seen any kind of plan for how he would, how he would address Native issues, unlike Biden, who has released quite a detailed plan. So no, we haven't seen a lot. We have seen just pretty much a listing of the what he describes as his accomplishments and legislation that he has passed.
And again, that's something that we pushed all candidates last summer at the Frank Lemire Presidential Forum. What is your plan for Indian country? What are the issues that you're going to tackle if you're elected? And at that point, several candidates had put out their plan. So really looking at that and understanding what, looking at the plan to see what their understanding is of Indian country. Do we have anything like that with President Trump?
I haven't seen it. No, we don't. I would say in short, no, we don't.
And so when you look at the reaction from your story, how can we continue covering the president and reaching out to people who support him? Because that's been an issue as well.
Yes, people were afraid to speak to me. They didn't want to go on the record. They said that they thought that their family or friends would give them grief. I did have one young woman who spoke to me, and then she thought better of it. She was concerned, and so she asked to have her name taken off. Native people pretty much, from the data that we can find, there isn't a lot of data about this, but certainly more, I think we can safely say more than 50% of Native people would vote Democratic and would probably identify themselves as Democrats. I've seen a couple of studies. One suggested that perhaps 19% of Native people vote Republican, and then another study even said it was far lower, more like 9%. But I think we can pretty safely say that Indian country is it's a Democratic bloc. So people's reaction, and it's a pretty visceral reaction to, I guess, what Donald Trump has done and to his policies, people did react really, really strongly. It often surprises me, the articles, the kinds of reactions that I get from articles that I write. Some things I'll think, oh, wow, people are really going to react strongly, and then I'll get nothing. And then sometimes, I'll just do something in the course of the work, and people will it will go viral. And this is one of those cases. It just went viral.
So, and it's interesting too, because when you look at the core value of the Republican Party, which is being conservative, it does align with a lot of Native thought and process. You know, that we take care of things, we conserve our resources, and we conserve, you know, what we have. But in this world, it's a little bit different take on conservatism.
You know, and the thing about conservatism is and like politics, it's organic, you know, and we think of the classic conservative as like perhaps Barry Goldwater, who ran, you know, for president in the Republican Party in the 60s. His brand of conservatism is really quite different to what it's, you know, morphed into now. We think of, you know, and also there's different elements of, conservatism. There's social conservatism in terms of, you know, family values and those sorts of things of the traditional religious values, and I think that many Native people might ascribe to those values, sort of morally moral and social values. But as far as the political values, I think they differ quite a bit.
All right. Well, we'll continue to follow President Trump and his campaign and all the candidates as well. Thank you so much, Mary Annette.
Oh, thanks for having me, Patty.
And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Tolahungva. Join us again tomorrow.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.